This is Things Police See, first-hand accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for checking it out. In this episode, I interview an old friend of mine and one of my old supervisors from the town I used to work in on Cape Cod. He's a great guy, and he's got some great wisdom, some great stories. He was a cop for 34 years. Started in the late 60s, so it's a really fun interview. I know you're going to love it. And I want to say thank you to everybody who keeps downloading and subscribing and commenting on the podcast. Thank you. And I've got a bunch of emails and a bunch of questions, and I'm going to answer those. So that will be coming in the next couple weeks. I'll throw some questions in there and answer what I've been asked. And I just appreciate it. I love the chance to interact with the audience. And it's just so cool to see it grow and people enjoying it and really gaining a better appreciation for the police officers in our country. So I would say if you're a police officer and you'd like to come on the show, I would love that. And a federal agent, state, local, someone from overseas would be great. I would love to interview you if your English is relatively strong. I'd love to interview you if you're a cop overseas listening. That would be a fun one, I think. So, again, thank you. And without further ado, here is episode number 12. Jon, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man.
My pleasure. I'm so glad you thought of me.
Of course. Just so that people know, you and I worked together on Cape Cod, where I was a police officer, and you were one of my sergeants. So I was totally psyched to have you come on here. I learned a lot from you on the job, and I know you were a police officer in Cape Cod for many, many years, so I thought it'd be a perfect interview. How long exactly were you a cop?
Well, the total time in is 34 years. However, and I started my career in 1969. That was my first summer as a police officer. And as you know, in Cape Cod, during the summer, they hire a lot of what you would call part-time workers, special police officers. Some have powers of arrest. Others are hired to do traffic. That first summer, I had powers of arrest, and I was at that time 21 years old.
Right.
And then I spent, I was going to Northeastern College of Criminal Justice, and on again, off again. And of course, that was during the Vietnam era. And I had pretty much had enough of college, although I had but a business degree, associates. And I left. I worked for a town in Dennis, which is mid-Cape area, and from 69 to 74, part of 75. And then I left the career for 8 years. And many things happened. I had a lot of experience running my own business and working for a large corporation, retail stores, et cetera, et cetera. But had some life changes, frankly, and people can do with it what they want. I sobered up.
Gotcha.
And, I realized I had a problem with alcohol, so I did what a lot of people do and checked itself. And as a result, I got back into... I had the opportunity, because I didn't burn my bridges, to go back and start police work as a special in Wellfleet, and then in the town of Eastham, I got full time in December of '83.
Jon, when you if you took a break for 8 years and you wanted to come back into police work, did you have to redo the whole academy, or was it like an abbreviated thing?
What was interesting is, of course, as you well know, they had a yearly academy for people to refresh. All officers are required to go back for in-service training.
Right.
And at the time, Mass Criminal Justice Training Council allowed a person to pass a couple of tests, and I had retained a lot, motor vehicle traffic and criminal law and so forth. So I didn't have to do anything except attend the in-service. And I was fortunate because afterwards they required, if you left for 2 years, then you had to go through the academy again. And as far as the academy goes, I felt fortunate in 1970 to go to the Mass State Police Academy for municipal police officers. Was a much better training than the local Barnstable. Not with all due respect, but
no, I heard that the local Barnstable one was like a joke.
Well, and let's face it, in 1970, football training, parasailing training, military training, they kicked your butt.
Right.
And physically, they knocked you around. They broke you down and built you up. And that's the way the state police was. And frankly, I'm forever grateful, although I was scared, crazy for the first 6 weeks.
Sure.
I really, I can say throughout my career, they taught me not to quit. And there were a number of times when I was by myself wrestling with somebody and trying to keep the gun from transferring over. And that training kept me alive. I really do believe that. And then, of course, they softened up over the years and made sure you had brakes and you carried water with you all the time. And I can remember when I was playing football in high school, we didn't have any water out in the field.
Yeah.
Not until game time. But not to go off on a tangent. But I believe at the time, the 1970s, I got the best training that one could get. So anyway. So
would you, just because our listeners, believe it or not, podcast is doing well. I've listeners overseas in the UK. There's people all over the world actually listening now, which is really cool. So I want to kind of describe to them what Cape Cod is like, this peninsula that's seasonal. So you and I worked for a town on Cape Cod where the normal population is goes up 6 times during the summer, right?
Yeah, normally I think the population year round is around 5,000 to 6,000, and it goes up to 30,000.
Right,
and that's not counting. We have a 4-lane highway that services all the way to the end of the Cape and back down to Hyannis area and so forth. So this 4-lane highway used to bring us a lot of business.
Yes, absolutely. So, John, would you say early in your police career, early in your police career, do you remember your most hot call, the first time you went on a call and you were kind of like, holy cow, this is for real, just kind of opened your eyes?
Yeah, I think it was just simply being green and having, as a 21-year-old wide-eyed kid, even just going to of course, Cape Cod is famous for major accidents, motor vehicle accidents. And some of them are pretty gritty. Some of them are pretty, and I always used to be really fraught with anxiety about going to a lot of calls. It took a little seasoning. And, of course, then the PTSD was not, they didn't know anything except for give them a stiff upper lip, and the guy that could not show any emotion was the guy who was to be looked up to.
Right.
Which is, and I don't go along with that today. A lot of damage was done. Alcoholism rate was high, and divorce rate, and so forth. And it was a totally different. Just to show you technology, the cruisers we had in '69, 70 and so forth. We had no cages in them. Excuse me. Our particular town didn't invest in spotlights on the mount on the door frame there. We had no portables. Of course, the technology of portables was about the size of a World War II walkie-talkie, and
right.
and our flashlights. A lot of you guys out there that are working on the job and so forth, we had those Rayovac chrome 2-cell, D-cell, and as soon as you hit somebody, the top would fly off and the batteries would go scatter, and the bulbs weren't bright enough to really see anything anyways. But so there were times when you arrested a couple of guys and put them in the back of the cruiser, occasionally you'd get a sneaker in the back of the head or whatever. Well, let's just put that once.
Right.
Of course, attitudes are much different. Policies and procedures were lax. Now we're overburdened with policies and procedures. You can't scratch your chin without. So it's gone the opposite direction. But,
yeah, in California here, they just passed a law where they basically want people to shoot at the police before they can shoot back. It's like almost that bad here. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, well, the media does a heck of a job of breaking down the spirit of the police officer to begin with. As you well know, because you were a trainer too, I was fortunate to have my department sent me to the FBI firearms schools for instructors early on when I went to my return to the job, and the training was excellent, but you were taught, and it only makes sense. We never were taught to use the word kill, because using the word kill predisposes that you had it in mind. We taught our guys, and it's the way it should be, even with civilians. You have to see deadly force. You have to be involved in deadly force, and that could be all kinds. That could be a gun, a knife. That could be a police officer weighing 110 pounds versus a 320-pound raging cokehead.
Right. So as long as you could defend your perception, you were good. As long as you could describe why.
Yeah. All you'd have to do is prove that you felt that your life was in fear of imminent, serious bodily harm or death, and that's the way it should be. I'm not sure what they're training now, but I was always one to teach basics and drill basics, so that when they hit the fan, they would do what they're trained.
I tell you, you were my trainer, the first guy to ever qualify me in firearms, and that was one of my fondest memories of going to the range, because you were so passionate about it. And as soon as you saw that I was taking it serious and that you had a potential shooter on your hands, you said, "Hey, you can shoot okay. Like you could be good at this if you really shot a little more." And it meant so much to me. You're really, really great to work with.
Well, I want you to know I really have finally gotten over the hole in my foot that you put there, but all in training. Just kidding. Well, yeah, and I don't know what's going on with training nowadays, because you see an officer, and I who am I to judge? But you make a traffic stop, and a guy runs away, and he empties his clip at the guy. I mean, a magazine rather. I'm not one to judge, but my reaction is what is being taught. If you're going to be a police officer, you have to understand that you have to accept that there is a chance that you're going to get hurt and maybe seriously hurt. but and you know me, and I know you. You were a great police officer because you had a good police officer is one who has intelligence and a great heart, and the combination of the two, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Makes a good cop. You have to be compassionate, but you have to watch hands as well.
Right. Yeah, you can't be a sucker, Absolutely. You did me a great service, John, very early, like year or month 2 maybe of being a police officer, when I had like a real traumatic experience on the job. And for some people it might not have been traumatic, but for me, this was the thing that bothered me. Like, this is the thing that first got under my skin. I don't know if you remember, but we had a call at a restaurant in town where the manager just sweeping up for the night, dropped dead, cleaning up, and was found by like one of the waitresses who was like cashing out or doing whatever she was doing at the end of the night. And I showed up to that with rescue right behind me, but I had just bought a sandwich from this guy. I knew this guy. I had a rapport with him. He was a good guy, nice guy. And then half an hour later, I'm standing over his body. His eyes are open. He's doing that open mouth, just gone. That I had never seen that face, and it got into me and rattled me. It really rattled me. And I can remember describing it. I was comfortable enough with you. I'd known you long enough where we met up a couple nights later, and I said, geez, Sarge, that has been bothering me. That, like, I'm getting a little anxiety, like when the fire radio goes off now, because that did something to me that I didn't even know. I didn't know I could be affected like that, And you said, good, that's okay. You're like, that's because you're a human being. He said, it's not a big deal. Do not judge yourself on it. Keep going. You're competent. You're trained. Don't worry about it. And if you need to, talk to someone, but don't let it get to you. And just someone with your years on saying that to me made me feel so much better, because it wasn't the stiff upper lip. You know what I mean? You weren't going, oh yeah? Well, you should quit then because you're a wimp. You know what I mean? You really, you took the time and you were interested in helping me. And I think I've thanked you before, but that meant the world to me. I did 10 years after that as a officer with that department. So thank you for that.
Well, I was sorry to see you leave, although you're still in service doing this. This is very important. Passing the word on and letting other people out there know that, hey, especially in this particular job, and same goes for firemen too, but we're out there, swapping spit with people, and it's a very difficult job at times. It's an extremely rewarding job, but we had a guy, and I know you remember him. He was the type of guy that if you had a situation, a fight in progress, and you'd arrive on location and go up and try and calm the people down and separate them. We had a guy, he would show up, and just his mere presence, he'd open his mouth, and all of a sudden everybody's rolling on the ground again. Discretion's the better part of valor,
Yep.
And I know there were times when going to a domestic, and some people would say that was crazy, but I remember going to a particular domestic, and husband and wife were really upset at each other, and a couple of kids in the room, and you can see that they were all very stressed out. And my first response was, I asked them if they mind if I sat down. I took off my 8-point hat, because we wore those at that time, and I sat down, and just in there being polite and asking them if they minded I sit down. Now, tactically, yeah, maybe I was putting myself a little bit on the edge, but sometimes you have to do that. I mean, that's where the experience comes in. There's some people I would have never done that. I would have just been on the balls of my feet all night. But in this particular case, I sat down, and it was only but a few minutes to restore order in the house. I was quite. I've always been quite honest with my feelings and situations because, my most of my ability is as a result of experiential. I came from a very dysfunctional home, and I've done a lot of work on myself. But so I know what it's like to be in a house where, people aren't getting along, and I can identify with it, and hence I know the quickest way to calm it down. I mean, that's the way it was. And as I say, we are the sum total of our experiences. And I was fortunate enough to be able to come back to a career after I spent a few years of, number one, I mentioned sobering up, and number two, I worked on some of the shortcomings of me, and so I was able to use my experiences to be able to quell some situations. But honesty is and being straightforward. It has a great impact on people.
Absolutely.
And being human, and I mean, listen, and as well as I do, there are times when there are people out there that are so far gone that you got to take them out of arrest, or take them out, whatever laws you use or whatever. Because they're kids that need to be removed from situations like that. But I feel very, very fortunate that in my career, I was able to use my background and my experience to assist, so that the guy in the blue uniform coming in their house or covering their accident or whatever is a guy with a heart as well. And hey, I got through 34 years of it, and I'm very, very glad that I would have never. I wouldn't. I'd do it over again, I guess is what I'm saying.
I know you loved it. I know it. Jon, can you describe the strangest or most bizarre thing that you dealt with on the job?
I really I've been trying to think about something that's there's been so many bizarre things at times, obviously with people, and we have a community of different people around here and up towards B-Town, but bizarre, I don't know. I pulled over a gentleman who I thought was a woman, and it was a guy going up to Provincetown to perform as a drag queen, and I pulled him over, and he jumped out of the car, highly excited, and I said, "Please get back in your car," and I walked over and talked to him, and he was in a hurry because he had to perform in a short order, and he was all dressed to the nines, and it initially struck me rather bizarre, but it was the guy was funny, and I promised that I'd go see his show. Unfortunately, I never did, but my imagination and so forth. But there's a lot of stuff that Route 6, as you well know, going through our town would deliver. Some bad guys, a lot of drug interdiction we had.
Oh, I remember a guy
But,
specifically that you and I got, and you can correct me on the details here, but we picked this guy up. I think it was your stop, and I backed you up, and he had a federal warrant for I think firearms violations or something pretty serious. And we end up picking him up. You hook him up. We take him back, and just the demeanor you had. You were like you were saying before. You kind of have a gift for talking with people and being compassionate when need be, and kind of letting your guard down when you know you can, when it's safe to. And I believe this guy was sober. I think he was an AA guy, and or he wanted to be, or there was something there. And you started talking about that after we booked him. And I believe that you maintained a relationship with this guy. I think he went to prison, and didn't he write to you from prison?
Yes, I got several letters from him.
Yeah, that was like floored me. I was like, wow.
Well, again, there was nothing that I performed that was really that great. It was just that nothing is altogether that bad. And he went and faced the music, and I believe he's out and doing well. It's been quite a few years though, but it's a rewarding job. If you allow it to, or it could be a very depressing job that makes you want to be depressed. And you have to just be tactful,
right,
and use tactics. You can't forget what you train. I don't care how nice you can be, but what we always say, watch the hands.
Right.
It's the hands that kill you. I've got to say, you wanted to know a situation. I was 2 years on the job in Dennis, and I was working the evening shift. You want to know about adrenaline pumps and so forth. And I was at the one of the beaches, and I got a call saying that go to a certain address. Man has somebody at bay in their basement. And so I put on the lights and went fast, and got a couple of calls, the second call, and I'd step it up. And I got to the front of the house, and there's a woman and a young girl waving me in the front door, waving me in. Now, understand we had no portables, no cages. I went off at the house, and I got to the front door, and she said, there were the doors in the kitchen down to the basement. And I said, well, get out on the other side of the cruiser. And I ran into the kitchen, and there's one of those balsa core doors. And I grabbed the knob, and at the same time I grabbed the knob, bang, the report of a gun.
Oof.
So I drew my weapon, and I opened the door, and right down at the base of the stairs was a guy looking up at me, and he looked up at me when the door came out, and he had a 38 in his hand, and he kind of swung it up in my direction. I think now, looking back at it, he was just startled. He just shot somebody. And I was squeezing the trigger. The hammer was going back. And frankly, if I'd have been hungover, overworked, tired, when that guy flinched with that gun and tunnel vision, I mean, that was 38, but it looked like it was a bazooka.
Sure.
I looked right down the barrel. And I had him right dead center, and I could have shot him, but it would have been tragic. But I had presence of mind to also see that he was standing in his T-shirt and undershorts, and I opted not to pull the trigger, and I ran down and picked up the gun from him, and I said, "Who did you shoot?" And he said, "He's right over there on the floor." And there was somebody there with a sweatshirt on, and he moved. He was unconscious, and his belly button, and he had two belly buttons, one of which was a bullet had entered. So we loaded him up, and he got to the hospital, and they took the bullet out. He was charged with armed burglary because he picked up a serrated knife inside and lunged at the owner, and that's when the guy shot him. But at any rate, to finish this tragic story, he went to court. He had, I think, 20 years to spend in Cedar Junction or whatever it was. And he got out with good behavior, maybe, I don't know, 7 to 8 years or whatever.
So that was the homeowner defending himself at the bottom of the stairs. I mean, that's so great for people to hear because, I mean, cops have to show up, run into a situation like that, and then make just snap judgments of just figure it all out real quick. Meanwhile, your adrenaline's dumped, your gun's out. That was just that's couldn't have turned out better for you. I mean, that turned out good.
No, and the sad thing is, the guy was an alcoholic and wandered in the house, but he got aggressive with a serrated edge and threatened the owner. So, but the thing is, when this guy got out of jail, he borrowed his father's car, went down to the local watering hole, got drunk, and on the way home hit a tree and killed himself. So there's a bunch of little stories around that one that it was tragic because that guy that was shot was human, and he was alcoholic, and he didn't get help, and there's unfortunately too many people like that. So I like being in that position as a police officer because sometimes you are able to reach people before they get to that particular point.
John,
but,
how many things that you were involved in, how many calls you went to, how was alcohol the predominant agitator? How many would you say? How many calls where alcohol was like really a multiplier there, making things much worse?
A majority, I would say.
Yeah, right? I mean, it seemed like every time I booked someone, they smelt like they just squirted Perel hand sanitizer in their mouth. Just the alcohol was boom.
No, it's true, and I don't think it's changed. I mean, there's a lot of people in recovery, God, and thank God for that. But the other thing now is, as a result of just recently, I worked as a recovery aide at overnights in an alcohol drug facility. I just finished that job up, but this opiate is another terrible, terrible thing because alcohol, you got a chance and you may have slow death, but opiates, sometimes you don't even get one chance, and it's incredible. So I hope they do something about that eventually. They're doing it now, I guess. But,
yeah, that's kind of like an underlying dark current of Cape Cod. And people who didn't grow up there, have never been there, understand it. Cape Cod, they don't understand that there is something kind of weird about Cape Cod. You almost have to be born there to live there. You know what I mean? Like the ebb and flow of people coming and leaving, and that touristy thing. And then the cold, gray winters when everybody's gone. For something about it has really kind of drives people nuts. And the heroin, the opiate epidemic there is. I mean, there was a documentary on HBO,
right,
on Cape Cod.
Yeah, it just happens to be Falmouth, the town of Falmouth on Cape Cod, apparently had the highest opiate death throughout the country. Pound for pound, person for person.
That's terrible.
I think it. Hence, they have some facilities there. As far as on the job, there's all kinds of war stories and that are out there that we all have. I know you've got yours, but one particular sticks out in my mind. as far as adrenaline dump and going one right after the other. Our day shift, someone came out of the post office and jumped in his car, and big, I don't know, Pontiac Trans Am, and he smiled at me, and then he laid a bunch of rubber down the parking lot and out to the road. Well, I chased him at a high rate of speed, so lights and siren and so forth, through a school zone, and finally stopped him. And I probably wrote 3 different separate pages of tickets: passing, solid line, just operating to endanger, all that I could fit on a piece of paper. And while I was writing I'm still, quite hyped up and heart pounding and so forth. The dispatcher called and said, see the rescue over at such and such a lane, not too far where I was. And I went from that into a cottage, and I walked in the front door, and there's soft music playing, just almost classical music. And I look at a door jam and going up to the second floor, and there are these pair of moccasins with beads dangling down there with dungarees that were ironed, and a woman had wrapped an anchor line around and hung herself. But the point being is that one right after another.
Yeah.
And it was eerie with this, soft music. Obviously, she, very unhappy woman and so forth, and took her life. But going from a high-speed chase through the thickly settled areas and children, and then I almost pulled the guy through the vent window. It didn't happen to have one, but and to get that other follow-up call, it's immediately go see rescue. I think that was the one that really the stack upon that kind of blew me away. There have been others, motor vehicle accidents with decapitations and so forth. And these are the real things that we have to deal with. But as I spoke to you, the important thing is you got to talk about it. When I started in 1969, you were pardon the vernacular, a pussy if you complained or said anything about it.
Right.
And nowadays, if you don't talk about it, if you don't get it out, it manifests itself inside your corporal body and manifests itself in diseases. And and I'm sure you can identify with the fact of having to get it out. And it's funny though when you retire and you go, oh God, no more of that. But the fact is, and you're fighting a war on 2 fronts. You're dealing with the public out there, and then in the administration and all the policies and procedures and so forth. You're afraid to move without, getting ostracized or written up. So
right.
The cop is kind of caught between a hard, rock and a hard place. But again, I do it over again.
Right. Jon, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for the young cop out there or the guy or girl that wants to become a police officer?
Yeah, because it's even nowadays. What do we got? So far this year, we have 60 plus officers killed. I think it was the last number was 66. That must be breaking all kinds of records.
Yeah, it's awful.
And I think the news, the media has a lot to do with it. But what I would say to someone starting out is train. You know, get to be an expert with your firearm. Now, you know, the old saying is, it's better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it, type of thing.
Right.
But develop the skills, and really, training is very important, because when you get into a hard rock spot, you do what you trained. If you train slop, then you're gonna compromise your own safety. Secondly, stay in shape. You know, I mean, and that means, you know, be good to your body. You know, here I am on my soapbox, but, you know, moderation is great, you know, but don't poison yourself with food or alcohol or whatever in large doses, you know, and training, physical agility, ability, and keeping in shape is certainly going to help your longevity. And be kind to yourself. That's important too. And don't be afraid to find somebody who's older on the force that you respect, and have a confidant. I'm not talking about in a bar I'm saying, you know, BS. I'm saying somebody that you can talk to and say how you feel. That has saved me.
Yeah, me as
on
well.
More occasions, you know, and that's very important. And always, you know, watch the hands.
Right.
I mean, really.
That's a good place to stop, John. Watch the hands. I want to thank you so much for coming on, John. I had a really good time this interview.
Well, I've been known to talk a cat off a fish truck, and I'm sorry if I rambled on, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to relive. And you know, I'm proud of what I've done on the police department, and I really appreciate your friendship, and I love all cops that wear blue.
All right, Sarge. Thank you for coming on again. I'll
Okay.
catch up with you after I shut off the recorder here.
Okay, Stevie.